Well, hello there, everyone. Here, talk about over here. I talk about for educational resources here, and whenever I was working on this, on this Photoshop painting right here, I was actually getting a lot of ideas actually. But one of those ideas is also talking about the parents' conversation with their children, and it could also be other educational resources especially. But one educational resources I would have to probably say is that you're talking about for how far our education goes, and how far our education goes. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever it comes to understanding about the source of education that somebody has, and let's just say that if most parents would say too that a lot of times if you're going to be asked the questions, and for sure if you can't give a reasonable answer, then first of all it seems like that you're not qualified just to be I'm like, yeah, like everybody else would say too, that do most of us feel like just a little bit about parenting, and maybe if it's babysitting or anything like that, do we feel that way sometimes to where that knowing about that, for how do you know if you are qualified to give specific answers and feedbacks and anything like that? But on the other hand too, though, that you're talking about, well, you're having a good heart, and that's another thing, that topic that I want to talk about, having a good heart, and so a lot of times it sure seems that way, that we want to go ahead and start a conversation with somebody, and let's just say that where does it all start necessarily? Where's the starter's kit here? And a lot of times it seems like it all starts out with a problem, right? The problem and the solution, and any source of a conclusion of the matter. And a lot of times it sure seems that way, that you really have had to experience a lot of the difficulties just to really understand a lot of things, right? But it sure seems that way, that whenever it comes to understanding education, though, that the first thing that, like any kids are going to maybe say, that they're going to go ahead and talk to their parents, or talk to a friend of theirs, any church members or anybody like that. And I want to know just a little bit too that yeah, whenever you start talking about certain topics, and maybe if it is maybe about what is it that you do know about certain things, and so a lot of times it seems like, yeah, like everybody else might even say too, that that's whenever you go ahead and zoom in and see that, okay, yeah, you're go ahead and look at the mom, you're gonna go ahead and look at the mom for about 5 seconds, and then go ahead and look at the dad, and you want to know too that which one do you think is smart and intelligence or anything like that. But on the other hand, it seems like that, yeah, whenever you tell a story about something, and if you were to include a few pictures, and let's just say a few of those pictures are going to include something like, yeah, what did Daddy say about the morning pancakes and in the morning coffee, and Mommy's she's in the kitchen, maybe baking muffins or something like that, and so it sure seems that way, that certain memories about what we have about our parents, and it could also be a friend of ours, and so a lot of times it sure seems that way, that you talk about a story about something, right? But like everybody else might even say that really, what have you missed about your experience? What do you miss? Yeah, what do you miss about that about your experience? So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that a lot of the hard work, and a lot of maybe the esteem that we talk about whenever it comes to a lot of the frustrations and a lot of difficulties, and maybe a lot of aggravations, right? And it sure seems that way, that each time I look at this picture right here, it's going to kind of remind me just a little bit about children's Tylenol. That, yeah, that, really, that whenever I'm like, yeah, talk about for children's Tylenol, and I was also thinking too that it's the same painting that I use for talk about for the child tax credit. But on the other hand, that whenever we're going to be having conversations with children, and maybe with a few friends of ours, and just kind of like getting like in a little group discussion, and talking about things. And it sure seems that way, that the first thing that more likely is going to come to your mind is toward that my education only goes so far to where that the things that are expected to get done and compared to the things for what you do know, and so it sure seems that way. That when we speak about education, though, that it seems like to where that well really that not everybody is perfect, but on the other hand too, it sure seems that way. That when we speak about taxes, though, and even when we speak about parenting, though, that should that really be a question toward your education only goes so far. To what I mean by is toward that if there's a lot of resources that are required, and I guess you say that that's another way of how you want to look at it is to where a lot of resources that are needed for I'll go and put a comma right there, and for what during the time could not be provided. So a lot of times it seems like that not everything is all already set go. So a lot of times you want to know too that hey, that whenever you're getting ready to work on something, you expect something to be ready, set, go. And most of the time though, it's like, well, really, you want to go ahead and just send a sticker like that to somebody to say that I'll get back to you about that, or I'll be able to take care of this, no problem. But on the other hand, it sure seems that way that every time we think about education, though, that it sure seems that way that from overall the overall expectations about everything else that you're working on, right? And you're 102 that the expectation is about the fact about that we need this that we need this information recorded on a file, or any sort of spreadsheet document or something. A lot of that stuff, for what technology relies on. And if we're talking about that, if it's medical information, or if it's anything that's in regards to any sorts of meetings or conference calls or anything like that. But it sure seems that way that the first thing that comes to your mind, though, when we think about that is toward that the understanding about that whenever you do receive something important, or maybe if you were told about something that seems to be important, that it seems like that there's a lot of expectations that are being expected, from you especially. So if I were to call it to talk about for you, or that the group or something like that, so it seems like every time you go to a lot of those meetings, that seems like I expect a good reasonable answer from the group, or from the other audiences that are listening or something like that. So it sure seems that way that it all starts by saying this toward it started by a kit. It was a kit that only included maybe 3 pieces. There were only 3 pieces that were included with this kit right here. So that's how it all started right here. Toward it, whenever we think about education, that it seems like that that if you were asked a question about something or to work on something, and it sure seems that way that not all the pieces are there. So let's just say that 3 pieces, and maybe that all together that there's about maybe 145. About 145 pieces that are required, just to be able to complete a task. And it's like, you're 102 with all those pieces that at the time that you were not able to provide them. So I guess I'm not really trying to make that any source of mathematical type fraction or anything like that. But let's just say that on the first half, though, that if you did receive any source of text message or anything like that, and let's just say, like anybody say too, that if you're going to be talking to somebody by chat in 102, that a lot of the things that are expected, and compared to the things There are a lot of things that maybe that you don't quite understand about certain things, but a lot of times you want to know too that yeah, well really, that how come maybe children's Tylenol can't work the same way? I talk about for children's Tylenol, right? That with children's Tylenol that we're talking about, that about every 6 hours or so, every 6 hours that you check, that you stand by and check, every 6 hours or something like that, that you kind of like stand by. I'm like, oh yeah, stand by, or that they'll be like, yeah. So it seems like to me though that whenever we're talking about for children's Tylenol or anything like that, that it seems like to me though that each time we think about that though is toward it, yeah, for how far our education goes whenever it comes to tasks and responsibilities and other agendas. And a lot of times it sure seems that way, that the parents might even say that too, toward it that we all have our own schedules, right? But at the same time, it sure seems that way, that your education, whenever you speak about your education, you might say that you've only completed, you've earned your GED, or if anything, that you've only earned enough credits to be able to complete for your associate's degree or something like that, or you've only you've only earned 3 credits out of that the training session or something like that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that there's only so much that's provided based on your knowledge of experience, right? So it sure seems that way, that whenever you first start working on a task, though, a lot of times it sure seems that way, that do we want to ask the question toward it, do you think that the moms have it a lot harder than the dads, or maybe that the uncles, or maybe if it's a friend of yours, and like you want to know too, that you want to know too, that the who has it harder than compared to everybody else. And so you want to know too that your education that goes so far, and you're probably want to know too that the first thing that you're gonna be thinking about is to where well, if everything is all there, or no, not everything's not there. But it sure seems that way, that whenever you first start working hard on something, and it seems like that you know. That so far the overall expectation, though, whenever it comes to understanding math and understanding about taking care of whenever bills come in, and also whenever it comes to doing the laundry and maybe doing the dishes, and maybe doing other sorts of housework, or maybe if it's farm work or anything like that. And you'll want to know too that so far the overall expectations, though, that you may have not learn everything from school. So let's just say that, what do we talk about? The source of training test, where you taught, you were able to, you trained yourself on how to do this stuff. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that, a lot of people, everybody else would say that, I guess, another way, if you want to call this, is towards about learning independently, right? But a lot of times I feel like saying is toward you actually does it really feel? Do you feel better whenever you're able to learn something independently? You're able to kind of train yourself and thinking is toward it. You develop something yourself, and I guess I can also use that word to talk about for development, and it's another way of how to interact with it. You actually learned that skill at your own time, and I know, like everybody else would say too, that instead of setting all the rules and restrictions and requirements all the time, and maybe everybody would maybe say that is for that really, that if people were to kind of generate some ideas, generate the ideas, and that generation of ideas comes by the mind thinking, right? To where that people are going to be listening to your suggestions and any comments and all, but still, I just really think, on the other hand too, if we're talking about maybe state requirements, if we're talking about any other sorts of rules and restrictions and all that, regulations, that a lot of those suggestions would maybe apply to a task maybe if there's enough votes, maybe on hand to where that maybe a certain task or maybe a certain request can be granted, and like everybody else might even say too, that a lot of decisions and suggestions would be listened to upon the person's voice. That based on the fact about that, if there's enough people who do agree toward it, yeah, let that person speak. Let that person give the suggestion. And so, do we really think that we perform better tasks whenever we're able to listen to somebody's suggestion and listen to somebody's comments, and also just to kind of train yourself into just thinking as toward it? Yeah, those ideas were not thought of before or something like that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that you might say something like, I am not an expert. Yeah, I am not an expert, but I highly suggest. I highly suggest or recommend, and like everybody else might even say too, that really, what's the difference between whenever you recommend something and whenever you suggest something? Well, it seems like to me that the the recommendations, I guess, are not the updates. Whenever you suggest something, that's not, it's basically like a draft, right? So it's like every time we think about that, though, it seems like to me, though, that there's really a difference. Maybe not really, but there's really a difference there for what's really suggested and what's really recommended. And like everybody else would say too, that whenever you form a draft, though, that's information that has not even been posted yet. Even in the comments, and it has not been, not yet reviewed yet. So every time you think about that, though, it sure seems that way. That yeah, I am not an expert, but really, that my education goes so far. So yeah, if you were to say something like that, and you want to know too that yeah, not fat, but go so far, but still that. But when we're talking about something like that, though, and if you want to go ahead and put like exclamation point and comma right there, and you want to know too that you want to start the next sentence by saying is to where that yeah, somebody else might say that I am not asking you for any source of requirement or anything like that, anything that's not provided, but for the best of your knowledge, though. The question is about the fact about what good resources can you provide right now that could be provided at some point later on, maybe in 3 hours from now, until it's updated. And so it sure seems that way, that most of the time it seems like the best of your knowledge is usually the answer. Yeah, the best of your knowledge, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that that answer a lot of times, like everybody else might even say too, that if they've been there to where that somebody's asking the questions and give reasonable answers, but still, you might say something like, "My education only goes so far, so what do you expect?" And so you probably say that the other person talking could also say is toward that that's not the point I'm making, or the point that I'm making is to where that yeah, do we really have to work backwards to where that what's been going on for the past 3 weeks or anything like that, or what's soon to come? And a lot of times it seems like what is really expected right now is toward that the things have already happened, right? But then what's soon to come? And so that's why it sure seems that way, that every time you think about that, though, in the 102s toward it, that's another reasons why that a lot of people, a lot of parents and everybody else are going to get upset about stuff, and like everybody else is going to be mad and frustrated about a lot of things. And that's why it sure seems that way, that that the first thing that comes to your mind a lot of times is that yeah, even if you do have 5 years of experience working on something, or knowing something, that it seems like that's still not good enough so far as the expectation goes. And you'll want to know too that hey, that that still doesn't answer my question. So a lot of times it seems like that whenever you do start a conversation with your parents, or it could be your neighbors, it could also be somebody that you're close to, and social worker or somebody, a counselor, and it seems like to me though that the first thing that you're going to maybe say is toward, yeah, well, really, I don't have a degree in everything. In case if you're wondering that, I don't have a degree in everything, and knowing about how many credits that you might get. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. That not everybody is perfect, but on the other hand too, that I guess it's all about the fact about the voice, about the person's opinion. That most of the time, before the best thing compared to the worst thing, and like everybody else, it seems like a lot of this talk and drama matter. It sure seems that way to where that whenever you start a conversation about something, though, it sure seems that way that everybody else seems to be expecting a lot more from you than what was originally on the agenda. And that's why it sure seems that way that if we're going to be having the conversations with our children, or if it's maybe about talking about our pets or anything like that. And so that's why it sure seems that way that when we speak about understanding about parenting, though, and whenever it comes to understanding about all the jobs and tasks that need to be done, and a lot of times it sure seems that way that somebody's maybe going to get back, going to respond in saying as toward in the source of return, such as, that is not good enough. So let's just say that on average, though, they say that, yeah, that is not good enough. That is not good enough. You're not being cooperative or something like that. So I'm like, yeah, if you want to call it narratives or anything like that, that ain't good enough. Or the conversation's maybe going to start out with maybe with a few capital letters or something like that. And let's just say that, you're not being honest or something. So yeah, that. So let's just say that on like yeah. So a lot of times, whenever somebody's going to be responding something like that, and you want to know too that toward that whenever it comes to reading a lot of emails and text messages and everything, and it sure seems that way that you might say that I am a full-time parent. So let's just say that if you say something like I am a full-time parent, and let's just say that like in a quote, or with an exclamation point or parentheses, or maybe if you want to add in maybe a few plus and minus signs or anything like that. But on the other hand, I'm like, I don't see no reason for that either. But I'm just saying that if you were to be starting a conversation with somebody, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that well, okay, if you're going to be adding any sorts of abbreviations and starting a conversation, no, that what is this supposed to mean right here? If you put space right here, that what smile ain't smile. Well, what is that supposed to mean right there? Like anybody say that if you were to do any sorts of quotes or abbreviations or anything like that, but a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever you do start a conversation, a lot of times that it seems like that the first thing that you think about is that a lot of those syllables that you don't quite understand whenever it comes to understanding about your IQ, or whenever it comes to understanding about your education. And your 102 is that really that you may have started out with the original typewriter or the original word processor before you got used to using the smartphones and the tablets and everything. But on the other hand, too, it sure seems that way that if you can learn the basics about, understanding about, all these syllables and these stickers and everything, and you want to know too, that how come the football or the soccer was not available in that original typewriter? Could you really type an A or a U with a smiley face, with any sort of surprising face like that, and say like on a keyboard as to where the hello or something like that? So a lot of times it sure seems that way. That when we talk about conversations, though, in year 102, the typical things that you cannot do on a typewriter, and year 102, that yeah, well, really, if typewriters would allow you to put any sorts of stickers or any sorts of bow tie stamped on there in year 102, that if more likely, in case if anybody they say is toward it, that basically mean is to where in case if you make a mistake, it's all about starting over, huh? So whenever you start over, and I know, like everybody else would say too, that not always, but I'm just kind of making a tease about that. But like everybody else would say too, that whenever you first used a typewriter those years ago, you might have said to where that one a simple mistake would had make you. I'm like, yeah, a simple mistake would cause it toward it. You would have to redo something, redo that something, or I don't know, make over or something. But still, that start a fresh, start out fresh. And so a lot of times it seems like people would say too that start fresh toward you would start on a brand new piece on a brand new typing paper, and it's such a typical typewriters. But on the other hand too, it sure seems that way that whenever it comes to understanding about our education, though, that at the time it seems like the text messaging has really come advanced to the point to where that at the time you want to know too that can you really see that in your reflection to where that while you're writing a message though can you really see a reflection just on the opposite side to where that do you think that manners could be better or worse so that knowing about messages. I'm like, yeah, if you type a message on there that you really just don't want to be presented or anything like that, and people might say too that yeah, well, talk about besides the typical greeting card, right? But on the other hand too, that when we speak about education though, that the understanding about that tax credit, and then also about children, and so a lot of times it's like yeah that whenever it comes to understanding about learning new things though, and you want to know too that whenever kids are going to ask the questions, and it sure seems that way that the parents want to know too that the good positive thinking, but what does it really mean to have a good heart for teaching our kids something important. And a lot of times it sure seems that way that there's a lot of parents would say too that based from the original start point. Now I know a lot of parents would say too that do you respond in a type of way toward the start point? That whenever you first start somewhere, that you actually start with the best solutions. You start with the best. You start with the best. So a lot of times, like everybody else would say too, that whenever you do start with the best solution, though, that it's resources. I can just say resources, but yeah, you can say solutions also, but on the other hand too, that I just like solutions, and but on the other hand, it seems like that every time I think about that though, and it seems like that maybe not everybody's going to see the work in progress, and then it's possible that they're going to be asking you that well, how come you didn't think about that before? They're going to ask the question, why didn't why didn't you think about that before? So a lot of times it sure seems that way that every time we think about a task or a priority or anything that's required for a job, right? Every time you think about that, it sure seems that way that you have at least 50 agendas that come to your mind, and it's really hard to concentrate. And so it sure seems that way whenever it talks about agendas, right? And so it sure seems that way that yeah, the top agendas, and so it's like a number of things are going through your mind whenever you're trying to work on something, right? And like everybody say that it don't seem like very many, but I would believe that whenever the holidays come around and whenever tax time, busy hours during tax season a lot of times, that I would say at least 50 agendas that come to your mind, at a time. So that's why it seems like that you really want to start out with the best solutions to begin with. So that would only be a list of about maybe 5 things, right? Maybe even 3. Maybe five simple things to keep in mind about anything that you're going to be working on. So the way I think about it, but so I can go ahead and put on here that yeah, 5 simple, and they're not always simple, but on the other hand, that just to keep in mind, if, 5 simple agendas, and to just to remember, and so it sure seems that way that yeah, that not everything is a straightforward line, but on the other hand, too, it seems like that the second time that you were working on that, it seems like that the whole process seems to go a lot quicker just because of the fact about what you learned from that process, and also the follow up about what mistakes that were made, or anything about followed by the suggestions, and anything like that. But a lot of times I notice that if you're getting ready to work on something, it sure seems that way that it did not take you 2 hours just to be able to get everything together. That this next time it only took the person a half an hour to 20 minutes just to be able to get everything all together. So it sure seems that way. It's all about development, right? To development in the process, and also like everybody else would say too, that you may learn things every day, but you're going to be asked and telling everybody about your education only goes so far. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.